GMs, are you tired of walking every single brand new player through character creation? Spending an hour per person holding their hand along every single step, every single time you get a new player? Well, I say no more. Today, I'm starting a brand new series within our bigger guide series where I'm going to be walking through character creation for you. So any players here, welcome. Today we're going to build you a character. GMs, if you're watching this, send your players here. I'm going to teach them how to do it so that way you don't have to. The GM should be there for you to bounce ideas off of, and then at the end, once you've made the character, help tweak things if necessary. But the GM shouldn't have to walk you through every single step of the process. It is just a waste of their time. So this is going to be a 3-part mini-series within the larger beginner series, plus an extra video for how to build a droid character, because that's a little bit more specialized than anything else in the game. I'm going to teach you how to build the backgrounds, motivations, character classes, subclasses, which in this game are called career and specializations, how to spend experience points, choose which race you're going to play as, all that fun jazz. We're doing that right now, so let's dive on into it. If at any point we're going through this and you need to pause, I encourage it. Pause the video, come back to it when you're ready for the next step of character creation. If you guys enjoy the series and enjoy our content as a whole, I ask that you blast that like button as well as subscribe so that way you see all of our future videos. So, step 1 for building a character. This is determining your background. Star Wars RPG is a narrative tabletop RPG. It is very heavily focused on the story. I've said that a couple times before in this series, and I'm probably gonna say it again. And in that fashion, your character should be one that helps make a good and compelling story. So the first thing you want to do is find out the idea behind your character. And you want to come up with this idea before you even start trying to build your character. Okay, so here are some examples that I came up with. The first one is maybe you want to play a shifty Rodian who's really good at sleight of hand and only really cares about money. However, your love of money has given you issues in the past and that's starting to catch up to you. Maybe you're the child of a wealthy Imperial officer who's just discovered he has force powers. When you go and confide in your parents, they want to turn you into the Empire, so now you're living a life on the run, trying to find a new band of friends who will be your new family. Or maybe you want to be a rebel engineer whose family was killed off by the Empire, so you joined up to work with your hands as some sort of therapeutic help for your trauma, as well as you want to help prevent the Empire from hurting anybody else. These are just 3 examples of characters that you have their background and kind of like a little bit of how they grew up maybe, as well as what drives them and what motivates them. These are things that you should be thinking about in this step. If you guys still are having trouble thinking of stuff, the book actually has a whole section on this, so I recommend going and reading through and just kind of seeing if that helps you formulate and brainstorm more ideas. This is actually one of the steps that you should bounce it off of your GM and see what they say. A common misconception is you don't have to come up with a full 5-page backstory. It can literally just be like a paragraph or 2. However, I know GMs are always grateful to get long backstories that they can build off of for future sessions. So if you haven't figured out your idea, pause the video here, come up with a paragraph or 2 that kind of briefly explains what your character is, and then at that point, unpause and we'll continue. Okay, while you wait, you can hit that like button, right? Okay, and step 2. This step, we're talking about obligation or duty or morality, and that depends on which book you're playing in. Obligation and duty are very similar, so I'm going to touch on those first, and then I'm going to get into morality second. If you're a Force and Destiny user, you can go ahead and just skip to the morality timecode. So, what is obligation? Well, it is a physical or intangible debt that your character owes. This could be a bounty contract on your head, this could be money that you actually do owe somebody, or it could be a favor that you maybe owe a friend or a family member. And then whatever that debt is, it'll correspond to a number, which is your magnitude. The higher your magnitude is, the more likely it's going to come back and affect you in a session of the game. So what are your options for the kinds of obligations that you have? Well, the rulebook actually has a full table that you can look at that has all these different options, and you can go in and pick whichever one you think best fits your character's backstory, or if none of them really suit you, you can work with your GM to come up with one. Now, your starting magnitude is determined by how many player characters are playing in the game. Let's say there's 4 players playing. You have 10 starting obligation each. There should be another table on the page somewhere that says how many you start with depending on the number of players. You should also see another table that has some information on how you can maybe increase your starting obligation, which means, you know, bad stuff will probably happen more often, but you get more starting credits or more XP. So let's say there's 4 players and each person has 10 obligation. You can maybe choose to get an extra few credits for +5 obligations, or a good chunk of more credits for 10 obligation more, but you cannot go more than double your starting obligation. At the beginning of each session, the GM is going to add together all the magnitudes of everybody's obligations. So let's say, you know, everything together adds up to 65 obligation. He will roll a D100, and if he rolls higher than the 65, then nothing happens for that session. If he rolls lower than a 65 or equal to it, then somebody's obligation's coming into play that game. Some GMs may even assign like, okay, well 1 to 10, that's player 1, 11 to 25, that's player 2, depending on how much obligation that player has. Or it could just be that the GM chooses one of y'all's obligation to do. However, if he does roll that 65 or less, every single player will -1 to their strain threshold, which we haven't really talked about yet, but that's kind of like your mental health bar. So if you have 11 mental health or strain, for that session you would have 10. If he does do the thing where he rolls for specific players, then he rolls in your number, you lose 2 and everybody else still loses 1. And if he rolls doubles, so like an 11, 22, 33, etc., then everybody's is doubled. So yours would be maybe 4 and everybody else's would be 2. So keep that in mind when you're choosing your obligations. I would say the main reason why it would be helpful to add maybe extra XP during obligations is that there's certain parts of XP that can only be spent during character creation, and so maybe that 5 or 10 might make a difference, but we'll get into that next video when we get into spending XP. If you look at page 43 in the book, you can find some information on how to reduce your obligation later. There's also some information on a penalty if the total party obligation exceeds 100. Those things though lie kind of outside of character creation, so I'm not really going to touch on them here, but they're pretty self-explanatory if you go and read the book. If you still have questions, feel free to ask in a comment below and I will be happy to answer. So duty works kind of similarly, and it's your character's focus within the Rebel Alliance. The only real differences between duty and obligation is that duty is actually a good thing, whereas obligation is a hindrance to the player. So let's say that your combined duty again is 65. The GM at the beginning of every session is still going to roll that D100, and if he hits above 75, then nothing happens. If he rolls equal to or less than the 65, then the whole party gets +1 wound threshold. So you get +1 health point pretty much. If your wound threshold is at 12, add it to 13. If he does the thing where it's specifically your obligation, you get +2 wound threshold, and if it's doubles like 11, 22, 33, again, you get doubled bonuses. So that could be you get +4 wound threshold and the rest of the party gets 2. Keep in mind that those bonuses are only for that session. That's not like an ongoing buff. So duty, you gain wound threshold. Obligation, you lose strain threshold. So flip your character sheets over to the back and write down the type that you chose for your morality or duty, as well as the magnitude number. If you chose to get any bonus XP, go ahead and write that down lightly in the total XP box on the bottom corner of your character sheet. So if you're playing with obligation or duty, go ahead and skip to the motivations chapter in the timestamp below, because I'm about to get into the force users and morality. What up, force users? My Force and Destiny peeps. Today we're talking about morality. So Force and Destiny has a different system, and it's called morality. It's very, very different than obligation or duty. Your morality determines how close or how far away you are from the light side or the dark side of the Force, and it's typically a scale number from 1 to 100. 29 is the dark side threshold, and 71 is the light side threshold, and most of the time you will start right at 50. So darker or evil actions that you take in the game will, at the end of the session, lower your morality, and not doing bad things will increase your morality. On top of your morality, you're going to have an emotional strength with an emotional weakness. If you go to page 50 on Force and Destiny, you should see a table that has a list of all of the emotional strengths with their corresponding weakness. So on the back of your character sheet, write down which emotional strength and emotional weakness best relates to your character. Don't write anything down for conflict or morality yet. So let's talk about conflict real quick. Throughout the game, you will generate conflict by doing evil actions, and certain actions give you a lot more conflict than other ones. So for example, if you steal from somebody, you may gain 3 conflict. If you beat somebody up, you may take 6 conflict. If you murder somebody, you might get 10 conflict. I should specify that that doesn't count in situations of self-defense, but like if you go up and just murder random Bill on the street, you're gonna gain 10 conflict. Now let's say you have 5 conflict and you roll that d10 and it lands on 8. Your morality would go up by 3. However, if you have 5 conflict and roll a 2, your morality is going to go down by 3. If you reach a morality of 29, you become a dark side force user, and this has certain special rules associated with it. The first one being, when you try to use a force power and you roll the white force die, you're only allowed to use the black colored circles, the dark side circles. If you want to use the light side force points, you're going to have to spend a light side destiny point and then take strain for every single force point that was rolled. At the beginning of every session, when the destiny pool is getting set up, for every dark side user, after the pool is set up, you have to flip over 1 light side point to the dark side. And when your morality hits 20 or below, your strain threshold gets decreased by 1 and your wound threshold gets increased by 1. And if your morality hits 10 or below, those get doubled. I would also like to note that reaching 30 morality again does not make you go back to the light side. You have to reach all the way back to 70 to get out of the dark side. In the game, this is what's called going through a redemption. And remember, there needs to be some sort of narrative story going along with your character and their redemption from the dark side. Now, the light side threshold, that is at 71. For every light side force user in the party, you will get 1 extra light side destiny point at the start of every single session when you're rolling the force die to set up the destiny point. We talked about it last video. If you haven't seen it, go check it out. If you reach 80 or more morality, then you get +1 to your strain threshold, and if you reach 90 or higher, you have +2 to your strain threshold. So now that we've covered light versus dark side, I want to go over your 4 options that you have during character creation, and these are bonuses that you can take for your character. The first option is you can have +10 XP to spend during character creation. The next option is you can have 2,500 credits at the start of the game. The third option is that you get +5 XP plus 1,000 credits. But the fourth option, and this is why I wanted to do this bit last for this section, is you can start your morality at either 29 or 71. So you can start on the dark side or the light side threshold. So flip your character sheet over, write down your morality is 50 if you took one of the credit or XP options, or write 71 or 29 for morality if you took one of those bonuses. If you took any credits, write that down. If you took XP, write that down at the bottom. Okay, and we're doing motivations next, which is technically like step 8 or something, step 7, or I don't know. I do it step 3 because it makes more sense to me to do this when you're thinking about your character. What are they obligated to? What morality do they have? What is their motivation? What drives them? It all kind of like fits together. So I like to do this now. So page up there for whichever book you're in to jump to the motivation section. Every single character needs a motivation. You need to have something that drives you forward, some sort of thing that drives your goals. Your motivation can be public to the rest of the party in the game, or it can be something secret that only you and the GM know. Now, whichever you choose, that is up to you. There are 3 tables within the motivations section that have options that you can choose from, and that ranges from ambitions to causes to faith. So I want you to read through all the tables and choose 1 or 2. If you choose 2, make sure they're from 2 different tables. And just like obligation or duty, you can actually work with your GM to create a motivation if you don't see something here that fits your character the way you think it should fit. Okay, and those are the first 3 steps for character creation. Next video, we're gonna jump into picking your species, picking your career, picking your specialization, as well as spending your experience points and your characteristics. So that's gonna be a really cool one. You can go ahead and jump on to that video now. If you found this video helpful though, please blast that like button, hit subscribe so you don't miss any of our new content that comes out every single week. And yeah, that's it for today, guys. I hope you guys have an amazing rest of your day, and I will see you in the next one. And as always, may the force be with you. Peace.